My name is John Michael Parker. I am a state representative, proudly serving the 101st District, Madison, my hometown, where I grew up, where I live now with my family, and Durham. And I serve as the co-chair on the House side of the Environment Committee in the legislature. I've been serving the legislature for 4 years, serving as chair of the committee just this last session. And I think for this conversation, I grew up on the shoreline. I spent a lot of time outdoors on the water, avid fisherman. Um, and I think really importantly, I'm a father. I have a 2.5-year-old and another one coming in a couple of weeks now,
Oh my gosh.
and thinking a lot about the future of our planet and what we're going to leave behind.
I am very appreciative to have you be a part of this project and very excited to be able to talk with you about aspects of all of those things and surely more. Congratulations on the soon-to-be birth of your second
Thank you.
child.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I also have 2 kids, just a little bit ahead of yours in age. What are some of the things that are on your mind at this moment, 2.5 weeks out? And are the things that are on your mind now different now that you're expecting your second than the things that were on your mind when you were, this many weeks away from the arrival of your first?
Yeah, wow. What a great question. So, as I said, I was born and raised in Madison and had the great privilege and luck of growing up in Shoreline, Connecticut, and all that meant, from the neighborhood that I was raised in to the schools I got to go to learn at, and certainly the experience of our beautiful, thriving, healthy, resilient environment. And as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time outdoors. I think a lot about the ecosystem, think a lot about the way that we interact with it, live in and among it, and influence it. And when I think about the future, I really see it. My first child is a little guy named Charlie, and wanting to do all of the things with him that I did growing up, catching crabs down at Ammonasset, fishing, clamming out on the Cape, all these things that are so dependent on the way that we steward our planet. Of course, I think about wanting to have those experiences and make those possible for him and his future. I think now that we're a few weeks out from our second child, it's going to be a little girl. It's really coming at this moment when there are a lot of changes coming to the way that we do environmental policy in our country. And I think some real challenges to some of the progress that we've been able to make, and things that are right in front of our faces in terms of the way that the EPA regulates emissions and what that means for health and safety. A lot of talk right now around the future of energy and offshore energy and what that can mean for our grid and for a clean, healthy, safe, powered future. So I feel like the new awareness this time around is what do we need to make sure we get right at this really critical moment to not set us back on some of the progress that we've been making and the sort of better direction we've tried to put ourselves on. And of course, that's going to be for Charlie and his little sister. But it feels that the political moment feels a little bit different right now. And I'd say as a state legislator, that's really one of the primary perspectives that I have here. I think in the long term, in the bigger picture, though, it's of course, I picture my family and I think about the future of those that are right around me, and in this chance to serve as a legislator and the work that I do professionally, which is in the education and arts and culture. Of course, I think about the discrepancies that exist among people across our state and across our country and across our world, and how connected we are and how the decisions that we make really do impact others and vice versa. And so I think that sort of brings up the idea of being a responsible citizen and steward of the environment. And how we want to make sure that we're protecting the climate, not just for the people that we love and that are right around us, but for all of us. And that's a responsibility that I think I feel more and more in leadership roles in legislature, in the committee, but then also just with a growing family.
Yeah, absolutely. As a legislator, and especially one on the Environment Committee, how is it that you hear from constituents? Like, what is it that you hear from constituents in terms of their own experiences and, impressions, fears, hopes for our environmental future here in Connecticut and in the world?
Yeah, I hear a lot initially from people about why they moved to Madison and Durham in the first place. So a lot of that can be about the shoreline in Madison, about the beaches. In Durham, I certainly hear a lot about farmland and open space, sort of less agriculture over time in the district itself, but a community that is so deeply rooted in that and the consciousness around living with and from the land. And I think a really deep respect for the environment. And so that sort of baseline, I think, is very rooted in the folks that I have the privilege of serving.
Yeah.
And so when I hear from people about concerns, it's because they are worried about the impacts of what we might be doing in Connecticut, right, or what might be happening in industry or federally that could have an impact there. So it could be everything from, on one side, thinking about sea level rise and coastal flooding and the real dangers and challenges that folks have faced even in recent years, and what that means not only for their safety in an incident, but also in folks' often biggest investment in their real estate, in their home, right? And what it means to be resilient so that you can protect so much of what your family and wealth and future is well-being is tied up in. So there's that side of it, with more issues around severe weather. It's maybe a little bit outside of the boundaries of our district in recent years, but there's been a lot of challenges, especially even related to crop loss, with storms that have come through, with hail that have damaged hundreds of thousands of dollars of product, and that's someone's livelihood. That's also the food that we eat, the well-being of our community, and certainly further across Connecticut. And so thinking not just about what's happening on the coastline, but storms and flooding and how water can have such an immediate and damaging impact on our lives if not managed well. I certainly hear about that. I think there's sometimes you hear from folks sort of across that generational spectrum, so folks that are a little bit older and maybe wiser and have seen more and think about wanting to protect for the future. There's some incredible folks in my community that have decades of advocacy in all sorts of spaces, in academia, in the faith community, certainly people that have done a lot of public service, folks that have worked at our agencies across the state and have served on boards and commissions in town. So there's so much wisdom and passion that people have built on. And then also hearing from younger folks. I mean, like one of the most memorable moments of this last session was we were hosting, and with some of our friends from some of the advocacy groups, hosting young people at the Capitol. And there's a student who's a high school student that made a little zine, which for those that don't know is sort of like a small DIY publication. And it was a zine about Connecticut climate legislation, and it was like 10 bills that we were working on with the name of the bill and like a wonderful 1 to 2 sentence summary on each of them, better than maybe, frankly, some of my colleagues or even myself maybe could have come up with in such succinct and compelling ways. And like, this is the stuff that matters, and this is what I'm handing out to people, so they pass these bills. And so that was just a moment of realizing how obviously important the work we do in the legislature is, but how specific people are counting on very specific actions that we can take, and knowing that sort of goes across the spectrum is really important to hear. So I think those are the kind of things that we hear from constituents. Certainly there's a sense of wanting to preserve and protect the environment that we have. And I think more and more it's also hearing about how are we preparing for the future. That sort of gets into questions about energy, about resources, even about food. This also connects to thinking about the way we build out our community, housing, development, what are we going to do to the environment that we live in to make it one that we can prosper in. And so I think more and more those conversations are further connected for folks as well.
Yeah. Could you give me a little bit, a brief rundown of, I think it was State Bill 5004, is that what you mentioned?
Yes. Yeah,
Could
sure.
you give me a little bit of a rundown of what some of the wins in that bill were?
Yeah, so House Bill 5004 was a big climate win that we had last year that was many years in the making, like many big pieces of legislation that takes some time to build and develop. The bill had a few goals that sort of brought together many sections of one of these sort of larger omnibus bills, but it was about planning. So what is the kind of path that we need to be on if we're going to mitigate some of the greatest damages from climate change? It was about developing the strategic approach for how we're going to coordinate across all of the different entities that need to be involved when we're thinking about a problem as complex as climate. So how do we align the working groups and the plans and the reports across multiple agencies, multiple government entities, but then also citizens and advocacy groups so that we can sort of know where we need to go and then start to figure out how we're going to get there. And then it got into questions about how we start to support a green economy that could sort of make the connection for some of the policy that we want to do with actually how that's going to play out in people's lives through workforce development, through jobs, through business regulation, and trying to set up, one of the key pieces there was the creation of the Clean Economy Council, which is getting folks to think about, across government, unions, business, how are we creating pipelines for folks to learn the skills of the workforce of a green economy that are going to be great jobs for people of Connecticut for the future. So the legislation, I sort of think about it as looked across the three different perspectives of like, where do we need to go, how are we going to get there, and who needs to come together to move us in that direction. There's 20 sections in the bill, so a lot of details in it. But sort of one more step taking out, I'd say, is one broader perspective, something that I was really proud of in the last legislative session in early 2025 was that we had this big climate bill. We also had a big resilience bill, which sort of goes hand in hand, right? Because the climate bill is how are we sort of managing the changes that are upon us and trying to mitigate the future impacts. Resilience is how do we protect ourselves now in this moment, right? So a lot of that gets into the way that we build communities, the insurance policies around being able to withstand like what comes at us day to day, and then the climate mitigation is how do we not make more negative changes down the future. So I think it was great that the committee and the legislature took on both of those issues side by side and really had these two bills that I think went nicely together.
Yeah, cool. That's great. It's great to hear. Kind of, I think maybe an extension of what you were just talking about, and maybe a step to the side of it, but you can kind of decide what are some of the things, like as we are here in this moment, and say like we as in like residents of Connecticut, with the perspective you now have, having gone through the process of passing that last year, and anything else that is that you're aware of through your work in the legislature, what would you say are a couple things that are facing us that are that we should be either aware of, be conscious of, be working toward, either moving toward or holding at bay? What do you see that might fall in that umbrella?
Yeah, I think the areas that we want to be thinking about are, I'll start, the first two that come to mind are really thinking about energy and actually then thinking about waste, which is really connected to a lot of this stuff. So from an energy perspective, we need to be thinking about both the amount of energy that we require to live our lives and to live the lives that we're setting up for ourselves, by which I mean, as one example, and folks might hear about this, the role that artificial intelligence is playing in our increasingly deeply integrated into our lives and our economy, and the incredible amounts of energy that is required for artificial intelligence to train these models requires enormous data centers and enormous amounts of power. And in many ways, it seems to me that this is already baked into our future. the role of AI, and so being able to have the power and the energy to sustain that work and that technology on top of everything else that is energy dependent in our lives, transportation as a big piece there, our homes. So we need to be thinking about the amount of energy that we're consuming, and we need to be thinking about where we're getting that energy from and ways that we can try to be more efficient so that we're consuming less energy, because the creation of energy then has negative climate impacts in many ways in much of the energy system that's in front of us. So ways that we can create, when folks talk about a greener grid, looking at the energy sources, much of our energy is created through natural gas, right? And so that's tons of emissions that are created when we're burning natural gas to get the power that we need to live our lives. There are ways to create cleaner energy. There's certainly scales of this, but something that's really top of mind right now is the work that we've done to try to set up offshore wind as a renewable energy source, and the federal government's attempt to come in and stop a lot of these projects in their tracks, billions of dollars of investment that have the opportunity for enormous savings for Connecticut ratepayers to try to get cleaner energy. So these are the kind of things that folks should be thinking about. And there's always this conversation, I think, in the energy environment, conservation space, and really every space where we think about what can my little actions actually make a difference. And that can apply for, like, am I turning off the lights? I would say it also applies for, like, am I going to vote, right? And I firmly believe, also as someone that once lost an election by 18 votes, I know that every single vote matters, and I believe that every action that we take matters, right? So in our day-to-day lives, how are we making decisions that are trying to consume less energy and be efficient? And how are we making decisions that are trying to connect the energy that we use to cleaner sources, whether it's solar, whether it's a heat pump at your home for more efficient air conditioning, heating and cooling, or whether it's being supportive of policies and projects that are trying to get cleaner wind, even a path for nuclear, which I think has to be a part of our energy future. It is now in Millstone and can be an increasingly larger part. So that's some of the stuff we could talk about on the energy side. That is all very related to our climate, and to draw the very clear point, the carbon emissions that we put into the atmosphere have the effect of increasing global temperatures, which have enormous impacts on our climate in the way that affects water and ice and storms and disasters, and then also on our health in terms of the health challenges associated with hotter weather and extreme weather with colder weather as well. And do we have sort of the built environments ready to prepare for a changing climate that has both more extreme heat and extreme cold in it? So all of that sort of comes back to energy, the energy we use and the way that we create it. On the other side then, just to sort of talk briefly about waste and why this is also such an important issue in the environment space, it's almost from a similar concept and framework of how we're thinking about energy and wanting to be efficient and responsible. The more waste that we produce, the more energy and carbon footprint that's required to process it. So we can make choices about the way that we manage our waste, composting, if that's possible for you, if you live in a community that can do food scrap diversion, but also the products that we choose, the companies that we choose to work with, their decisions around waste and packaging and recycling. Certainly what we can do in terms of our own lives, in terms of recycling. Connecticut has done some work on what we call the bottle bill, which is trying to incentivize further recycling for those products that can be reused in their future of their materials. So this is a big challenge in Connecticut. And I think it's, again, from both sides. How can we, on one hand, try to reduce the waste that we create and the load that weight is going to put on our climate and our economy, but then also how can we manage it in a more sustainable way? How can we support policies like composting, diversion, recycling, reduction that are going to reduce the size of the problem overall? Because if you just think about the history of waste in Connecticut and across our country, over time we've learned that unregulated burning can be very toxic to folks and have health impacts. When we simply send trash to an incinerator, especially ones that are not prepared to sort of have the state-of-the-art technology to ensure clean emissions out of those. But then also, dumping waste into landfills. Now Connecticut is shipping loads and loads and tons of waste across the country to Ohio because we don't have room for it here in Connecticut. And so that is having to pay for and deal with the emissions of getting all of that waste halfway across the country. And then the impact on some community out there, which sure, it maybe has some more space now than we do in Connecticut. The negative environmental impact, the toxicity of loading up landfills. So we need to think more about sustainability and how we build a more circular system and one that can be self-contained in the state. So those are two big areas I think we think a lot about in terms of the committee. And the impact on our climate from some of the day-to-day policies that we have.
Nice, thank you. What is bouncing around a little bit here? What are some of the ways that your work in arts and education and environmental legislation? What are some of the ways those all overlap and can overlap?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a part-time legislature in Connecticut. And so in my full-time work, I run a nonprofit that does arts education work. And what we do is bring teaching artists into schools and communities across the state because we believe that the arts, through creativity and imagination and inspiration, have the ability to really support student learning and growth and well-being. Can actually make for more impactful school through the inclusion of the arts, even if you're not going to grow up to be a professional artist yourself. Mm-hmm. So this is the work I think about a lot. It's influenced my life, having grown up in the arts, and again now trying to raise a young artist, happily, joyfully raising a young artist. So I love the question about the connection to climate and to the environment. I'd say sort of in a very specific way, there are actually a lot of teaching artists out there whose programs are rooted in the way that we live in and take care of and protect and steward the planet and its climate. And so whether it's presentations by folks that are telling stories that are rooted in folk tales about the earth, to folks that have a more scientific connection that are doing programs that are teaching students about the climate, about biodiversity, that are using the arts as a way to spread knowledge and share information with young people, or even hands-on workshops. One of our incredible teaching artists does a program, Upcycled Art Making, which is having students bring in otherwise trash materials, so think bottles, paper towel rolls, whatever it might be, and turning that into beautiful visual art, bringing second life to that. That's work that a lot of artists do. There's some great folks down at Hammond Asset, actually, in my district that have beautiful installations related to that. So getting students to think about that, because it's making art, but it's also thinking differently about the materials that are in front of you every day. So there's, I'd say, the sort of like specific overlap, which is pretty significant. But then just in a broader perspective, sort of it makes me think about the work that we try to do in our arts learning work is helping young people find their voice and be able to articulate that, and to share their ideas and their emotions and their stories with other folks. And I think that's at the core of a lot of the advocacy that goes into, again, whether it's climate, environmental, or otherwise, people and their lived experiences and how they want to create a better world, protect the world we have, and create a better world for them and their loved ones and their communities. Those are sort of all of the core skills that get into the way that we can help young people find that voice and express it. And so maybe even, as I said before, being able to hear as a legislator from young people that are sharing, and even in a way that's sort of connected to the arts, is just so powerful, because that's the way that we communicate, and that's the way that we make change.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, as stripping away your professional connections and legislation connections. Is there do you know where, is there something that you can express about your own, just like where you see the world as it is, what you want to preserve and what you want to move along for the rest of your neighbors and community?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think that I'm grateful you're editing this because I don't know exactly where this answer is going to land, but I'm kind of starting with the core of the idea. I'll start this way. This year, for the first time, my family is participating in the CSA, the farm share, at our local farm, Bishop's Orchards in Guilford. We love it. And so every week, me and my wife and Charlie, we go down and we get our big green basket full of this beautiful fresh produce that has been grown right here in the place that I grew up in, and sourced from local farms from around the state. And so we go home with our, big bunches of lettuce and, 15 peaches and sometimes funky things that we have to figure out how to cook. And then we go home and we wash everything and we sort of think about what we want to cook. And then we try to get Charlie involved and we're chopping veggies and putting them and sauteing them and making these meals. And there's something that feels so wholesome, doesn't quite capture it. Connected doesn't quite capture it. Rooted is maybe part of it. But to be able to sustain and to feel the fullness of that, the connection to our land, and that sort of then also goes through to the for me, I mentioned before, sort of being loving the outdoors and the water and fishing a lot. And maybe side note, if this ends up fitting in or not, I'm recently on the board of an organization called Eating with the Ecosystem, which is a nonprofit based in Rhode Island, but does work in Connecticut and Rhode Island and in Massachusetts, which is really thinking about sustainable fisheries practices and how those can sort of influence policy, but also our day-to-day lives. So last week, we went out inspired by some folks that I met through the organization, and me and Joyce and Charlie went and found, foraged a lot of these tiny, they're called Asian shore crabs. These tiny little crabs, you can grab them, they don't pinch you, you just grab them with your hands. They're like, an inch long. It's an invasive species, so it's good to try to pull them out. And we got, 3 dozen Asian shore crabs, foraged them from came home, cleaned them out, put them in, and made this delicious food that had the shore crabs. It had some stuff from our CSA. And there's just a sense of completeness that I feel in being able to live what feels like a healthy, sustainable, locally rooted life. I'm certainly aware of that and the value of that as I'm getting older. I don't know if I would have articulated that way, 10 or 15 years ago, certainly probably when I was growing up. But to be able to do that with my family feels so special. Now, obviously, there's an incredible privilege in being able to have the means to be a part of a CSA, right? So many folks right here in our state and certainly across our country do not have access to healthy, fresh food. That is an enormous barrier for folks and their well-being. I also serve on the public health committee and think a lot about those systems and challenges too. So there's a privilege, and there's a privilege in being able to live in a community where you can go down to the shore and forage the crabs that you're going to eat that night for dinner. So I'm aware of that, and I think that what I feel for myself is wanting to be able to protect that, to appreciate it, really to experience what we have, and then to try to do work that are to put in place policies that will help everyone across our state have access to this kind of healthy, sustainable, full life. And that could look different for different people, right? It will. Mm-hmm. I think what it means for my family right now is that sense of the connection to the land, to the sea, to this place that we live, and that we want to nourish and sustain us. And that's something that we really need to protect and to steward.
Fantastic. You touched a little bit on kind of aspects of both things that I'm curious to ask about. And so if it turns out that you wind up repeating yourself, that's fine. If
Okay.
it turns out it's something else, that's also totally fine. But as someone who grew up in Madison and chose to move back to Madison and live there as an adult and raise a family there, what's something that, obviously I imagine there were a number of things you've already acknowledged that you appreciated about the area, when growing up. And so you had reasons to come back. What's something that you now appreciate about the general area, appreciate about living in this place that you didn't appreciate when you were younger?
Yeah, I love that question, and I have a specific answer comes to mind, and for me, it is Hammonasset State Park. So Hammonasset is the largest beach state park in Connecticut. It's this beautiful part on the eastern side of town, and it's this enormous, comparatively speaking to many other of our small private town beaches, public access for folks across the state of Connecticut. Now, I will say, growing up, I spent maybe more time at the surf club, which is the town beach in Madison, which is a little bit closer to the house that I grew up in. So maybe that's the big reason. But as I've now as an adult coming back and places that I go with my family, we spend a ton of time in Hammonasset. And I think what's special about it is that you see an incredible cross-section of life, of diversity of people that live in our state at the park. At the beach, enjoying this public resource that we all help steward and that we all should benefit from. Before I joined the legislature, they did something that I think is awesome. It's called the Passport to the Parks, and it was a program that changed the way we pay for park access over to vehicle registrations, so that no longer did people have to pay when they got to the park, and that opened up access to make it even more accessible for folks. We can certainly do a better job with public transportation and how we can get people to and from. They've done some great work in our community with bus access, with trying to get for more parking. And listen, there's a lot of challenges that come with having 50,000, literally 50,000 more people that are part of our community on some days in the summer. I mean, we have a population of 13 to 15,000 in Madison, so 4 to 5x that will be there on the beach. That's a strain, frankly, on our municipality and our resources, and our leaders do a great job to try to manage that. And there's more we could do, I've certainly got my asks there. But if we zoom out, we think about what it means to have public access to Connecticut's shoreline. And Hammonasset itself is this beautiful stretch of beach that has ecosystems that we take for granted in terms of wetlands, in terms of the shoreline, the rocky jetty out here, the meadow, the salt marsh, sort of overlooking towards Clinton. And then it's a beautiful place with miles and miles of roads to walk on and push strollers along with little kids and to bring your dog to and to rollerblade. It's just this, to me, is a beautiful example of a place where folks from across Connecticut can interact and be in nature with one another, can appreciate a beautiful day at the beach, can learn from the great learning that happens down at the nature center, and it's public access. And those of us that were lucky to grow up in Madison take that for granted. I think sometimes we were down there the other day and we met a family that was there from Enfield. The as far away right from as you could be in Connecticut, all the way up on the Massachusetts border, that had come down and was spending the entire day there towards the end of their summer. Because it's just such a special place to be. So I think that's one of the resources that I'm really proud of to be in our community.
That's fantastic. It really is a wonderful being with that many people who are all out of their usual element and
Yes.
in an incredible shared natural space. It is really a fantastic aspect of that place.
Yeah.
My mom grew up in Enfield.
Okay. Got it. So to get to the beach from Enfield is an investment, right? It's a hike.
Absolutely.
And you want to make sure you got a place to be to. Yeah.
Yep. On the flip side of that, what is a challenge that faces those of us living in Connecticut, and maybe it's more specifically like, in your community that you grew up in and now live in again, or wider, you can choose, that you didn't appreciate then that you appreciate now? And a lot of time has passed. It might be different than what existed when you were growing up.
Yeah. I think the challenge, maybe this will connect back to some of what I was saying before, but the challenges that I'm aware of now that have existed, but I wasn't as aware of them, is the way that and many of us take for granted that we will flip the light switch and the lights will turn on, right? And that we'll be able to go to ChatGPT and ask AI to do some extraordinary thing, and that in 10 seconds later it will produce something, because somewhere down some stream we cannot even begin to imagine, some power plant is sending enough energy to some data center to process the stuff that we need. To touch on some other things I've mentioned too, the fact that we can take for granted that we'll go to the grocery store again when we have access to even get to grocery stores, and that fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy meat and dairy will be there for us to come home and to sustain, and that like we can take all this waste that we create and leave it out at the curb, and the next day it'll be gone. The awareness then around all of the resource intensive, financial, energy, people, human capital, otherwise, resource intensive systems that it takes to make life work, and how there are breaking points that we can, tipping points that we can be reaching in our climate that will make those systems unworkable. That is an awareness and a pressure that I feel, and wanting to make sure that those systems can still work, right? And that we have enough affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy to power the world that we need. That we can, whether it's food that we're getting from our community or from elsewhere, that we can have access to healthy, safe, nutritious food, and that the way that we interact with all of the, especially at a time when you can go online and click a button and a shirt from the other side of the world will be on your doorstep 7 hours later, to be able to have access to the world in the way that we do, the incredible systems that go into place behind that, and then like an economy that balances all of that and makes sure that people can succeed and earn their fair share. Those are all really actually quite tenuous systems that it takes a lot of delicate, thoughtful policy to create. So I think that maybe it's a little bit broader than just right in my community, but those are the things that I'm now aware of and wanting to help try to get right.
Yeah, cheers to it. Is there anything that we have not yet brought up in this conversation that I haven't thought to ask about that you want to make sure we include?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm like, how did I end up, talking about the farm share? But I'm glad that we got to. I mean, we are the Committee of Cognizance for the Department of Agriculture. So the folks at DOAG and the work they do is really important. So I'm glad we hit on climate and ag and food and health and safety. I mean, the most resonant, important framing that I think that exists for the work we do on the committee is that we are talking about affordability, we're talking about sustainability, and we're talking about health and safety and well-being. Bringing back all of these policies, which can feel so dispersed and far away when you think about the size of, maybe not our state, our country, our planet, And like I said, the little impacts that we do now, sometimes it can be hard to make that real and why this matters. But the work that we're doing in the environment, in climate space, is so that we can make our lives more affordable. It's one of the biggest challenges we hear from across the community, and certainly overwhelming our politics right now. And that we can protect people's health and safety and well-being. This gets back to being able to have the literal public safety of knowing that extreme weather events are not going to threaten you and your loved ones and your community, that the food will be there to sustain and to nourish you. And so I think it's important to connect those concepts back to the stakes of what we do. I think sometimes environmentalism and environmentalists can be seen as crunchy folks that want to save the planet. The reason we want to save the planet is because we want people to be able to live healthy, safe, sustainable, fulfilled lives every day. And I'm really grateful when there's chances to tie those two together and to connect this work to the economy, to public health, because that's when I think it's meaningful and we can actually do the heavy lifting that it takes to get some of these policies through.
Yeah, John Michael, I would love to keep on talking, but I also want to let you get home. Thank you so much once again for making the time to come in and join us and be a part of this project.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know how you take that and turn it into a minute, but kudos to you and your team that can figure that out. But thanks for letting me reflect on this stuff. It's a nice time to do it because we just had this meeting with the agency, talking about our emerging priorities for 2026. So maybe I'm in sort of a reflective moment. So thanks for the chance to talk about all that.
Absolutely. Most welcome.
Cool.
Appreciate it.